Hot goings on in the world of the internet. Evan Greer, the deputy director of Fight for the Future, fightforthefuture.org, is on the line with us. Evan, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Thom. It's been a minute. Good to talk to you.
Great to have you back with us. So, facial recognition surveillance. First of all, you want to define some terms here?
Sure thing. So, facial recognition is a type of biometric surveillance where law enforcement or a private corporation essentially scans your face and then can match it against a database of photographs that they have. And of course, there's all kinds of databases of photographs, including the ones that the DMV collects for driver's licenses, but also ones that, for example, Facebook is assembling as we all upload massive amounts of our own photos willingly to those types of corporate platforms. So this is a type of surveillance technology that has the potential to become incredibly ubiquitous and essentially allow governments to track their own populations everywhere that we go, assembling profiles of our religious beliefs, our political associations, more or less everything about us, because we can't leave our faces behind when we leave our homes.
And I know in China and frankly in the UK as well, although China and the UK use this information differently. There's pretty much no place you can go, at least in any of the cities, where you're not continuously 24/7. Well, not in your bedroom presumably, but although who knows if you've got a smartphone or a computer with a camera in it, where you're not under surveillance. I mean, every street has street corner cameras there, and they're not just used for traffic; they're used for facial recognition to track people. How far along is the United States in having that kind of public infrastructure, publicly owned infrastructure available to police and government, that actually should be a legitimate concern for us?
So that reality is really just around the corner unless we do something about it. And this technology is spreading incredibly quickly. The tech industry is being very aggressive at marketing it and selling it to law enforcement agencies. And law enforcement agencies are hungry for it. They want more power. They want more control. They want more ability to monitor people and track them. And frankly, a lot of local police chiefs and stuff, they just want to be able to brag and say, we have all the coolest new toys that are available on the market. And so, that is happening despite the fact that facial recognition is repeatedly shown to be incredibly inaccurate. One study showed that the type of facial recognition you just mentioned happening in the UK was inaccurate up to 98% of the time. And what's worse, those inaccuracies aren't the same for everyone. An MIT study showed that facial recognition surveillance disproportionately and systematically misidentifies people of color and women, which has real-world consequences. It isn't just like, oops, the machine made a mistake. That mistake could land an innocent person in prison, could subject someone to police harassment or detainment, or have someone hauled in for questioning, just because a cold, inhuman algorithm basically pointed at them and said, that person looks like a criminal.
So we know that facial recognition is already being used on some of these platforms. What do we do about it? What's the proposed? And also, government is using this. In fact, one of the big stories just in this last week is that both ICE and the FBI apparently have been accessing the databases of photographs from DMVs, from Departments of Motor Vehicles, on a state-by-state basis. And we don't know what they're doing with that information. But the states that allow driver's licenses to people who are not citizens and specifically flag them as not being citizens, so they can't use that driver's license, for example, to vote. I'm not sure you could even use it to get on an airplane. Those states' databases are basically giving to ICE, here's all the people that we know are not documented citizens. So these stories are coming out. So what is your suggested remedy?
So my organization, Fight for the Future, just launched a brand new campaign yesterday at banfacialrecognition.com. We're the first organization that's calling for a complete and total federal ban on all forms of law enforcement and government use of facial recognition surveillance. And really, from my perspective, that's the solution here. The tech industry wants to skip the debate and totally, avoid talking about, should this technology even exist in the first place? Should law enforcement have these capabilities? They want to assume, yes, of course they should. Let's get to the question of how do we roll this out? How do we profit from it? And basically, how do we assuage people's fears? So that's why they're talking about regulation. From our perspective, there's no way to regulate this type of surveillance. It's surveillance that simply should not exist. I would put this on a list, a short list of technologies like nuclear and biological weapons that simply the threats that they pose to a free and open society, to people's basic human rights, far outweigh any potential benefits that they could have. And they frankly simply shouldn't exist. If we could go back in time and prevent humans from ever developing nuclear weapons, wouldn't we do that? Well, we can't go back in time, but that's where we are with facial recognition right now, and that's why we're calling for the government to ban it.
Are you getting much purchase with this, much agreement? I mean, it seems to me like most Americans, you say facial recognition, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders or say, well, yeah, it's kind of cool how, my phone organizes my pictures.
Surprisingly, I would actually say that this is really resonating with a lot of people. I think there's something very visceral about the idea of having your face scanned and stored in a database that seems to be gripping people in a way that other forms of surveillance, like, for example, the National Security Agency's metadata or phone records collection programs, just didn't quite to bubble up in the same way. And interestingly, we're also seeing bipartisan appetite in Congress to actually do something about this.
Well, that was my next question.
This is something, at an oversight hearing, a little while ago, you got AOC and Jim Jordan from the Tea Party agreeing that this technology is inherently dangerous and grilling officials from DHS about it. So this is one of those things that really does cut across the political divide, and where I think there's, both tremendous threat, a clear and present danger posed by this technology spreading very quickly, but also tremendous opportunity. We've also seen a lot of momentum at the local level. San Francisco just became the first city in the country to ban local government use of this type of technology. Somerville, Massachusetts quickly followed suit, and now a number of other cities are considering it. Just today, legislation was introduced in Detroit to limit facial recognition surveillance there. So this is something that's growing and spreading in terms of a movement. But again, I think we're at a turning point. If we don't rise up as a society and say no, this is not acceptable. We don't want to live in a world. We don't want our children to live in a world where they are constantly being watched by their government and corporations at all times. If we don't rise up and say that, then that's the world that we're headed for, and we're headed there very quickly.